Welcome to Fun and Fundraising, everybody. The podcast where we talk with people behind top nonprofit galas and signature fundraising events to showcase how they positively transform their communities. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, and today we have a really special episode today. And this is something I've wanted to do for a really long time, and I'm glad we were able to make the stars align to make this happen. So we've got Jennifer Stevens, who is the CEO and president of JHL Company, and they are the event production company behind Mack, Jack, and McConaughey, which is Texas's largest single fundraising gala of the year. In 2024, it raised over $16 million, y'all. And we also have Susan Hewlitt, who is the executive director for the Dell Children's Foundation, which is one of the Mack, Jack, and McConaughey beneficiaries. And I thought it would be great to have a conversation with these two remarkable community leaders about the partnership and what those funds from Mack, Jack, and McConaughey do to help further the Dell Children's mission as well as the Mack, Jack, and McConaughey mission, because it's more than just about raising the money. It's also about what the money does. And I can't think of two people better suited to talk about this today than Jennifer and Susan. So with that, Jennifer, Susan, welcome. And I'm so thrilled to have you both here as guests today.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
having us.
Oh,
Great to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you both. So we're going to talk a little bit about the missions of the organizations for people that are not familiar with it. So Jennifer, talk a little bit about the mission of MJNM.
Sure. So Matt Jet McConaughey is an event. It's held once a year, and the mission is to raise as much money as we can. We say to empower kids. And what we mean by that is the beneficiaries that MJNM works with all work in the space of serving children in health, education, and wellness. And so our mission is to raise as much money as we can and then see those dollars go to work through these incredible organizations.
Fantastic. And Susan, talk a little bit about the mission of the Dell Children's Foundation. Then we'll kind of get a little bit more into the partnership after that.
Great. And we are just so aligned with what Jennifer just said, because I'm going to read it verbatim. Our foundation mission is to raise philanthropic dollars in an ethical and strategic way to impact the most children with the best care. And that's just it. And that's what MJNM helps us do.
And it also helps. And I've seen the hashtag, and many of you have seen the hashtag, especially if you follow Matthew, because he's posted it several times, hashtag Empower Kids. So Jennifer, I'm glad you brought that up. And Susan, how, what you all do with Dell Children's aligns with that. And, I want to talk a little bit about, because what MJNM does is really unique. And what I found that's so trailblazing, for lack of a better term, about MJNM is there are so many organizations now that have followed your lead that have sprouted up since you've all started it. So talk a little bit about the beneficiary organization model, and more specifically, what stood out about Dell Children's.
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. I mean, the model as a whole, I think, way back, the concept was fairly simple, which is how do we align all of our resources, the guys, Mac, Jack, and Matthew, of course, have their own spheres of influence in terms of sponsors, partner brands, friendships, and people that want to do things and support things that they do. And so the concept was pretty simple. How do we align those three such that we can really rally those resources toward one thing? It was one day, now it's three, but whatever. But one thing, one event over a few days, and then raise as much money as possible. And so that was really the principle by which we started. And so it was like, okay, how are we going to do that? I will say that it's tricky because, of course, you have to then hold off other organizations that are coming to you making requests. You can't say yes to 15 other things and then go back and say, well, but we only do this one. So they had to be very disciplined, have had to be very disciplined about saying, this is our one thing, which can be good and bad, but it's worked out great. And then aligning all of those resources, you begin to build a lot of trust with your donor. The donor knows, okay, we're going to get asked to do this, but it's going to be once a year. And then we've built trust with them that when they do that, when they invest in the event, they're going to get an incredible experience. And so we also produce just an incredibly impactful, fun, great experience event. And you have to have both. I think cheap gets cheap. So we really go all out in the production to wow people. And I think that's been a big key piece of success. As it relates to Dell Children specifically, Jack is actually the one who originally came to me and said, we need to partner with an organization that can help us reach where I think not very many children are being reached, which at that time was pediatric food allergies. And he said, you hear kids suffering more and more. You hear instances of children even, it being lethal, yet we don't have very many resources in this space. And I said, well, I don't know much about food allergies, but I know Susan Hewlitt. So I'm going to call Susan at Dell and we're going to have a meeting and we're going to see what we can do. And, Dell is very entrepreneurial in their approach. All of our beneficiaries are very entrepreneurial in their approach to serving kids. That's something that's very important to the guys, and getting those dollars, to work for the kids in a very smart way. And so Dell was just like, from that first meeting, Dell was just a perfect fit. And of course, as Susan will tell you, we've gone on to fund. I mean, we've blown past food allergies now. We're funding all sorts of things at Dell, which is great, but again, all with an entrepreneurial spirit, all with solving problem. Where's an area that needs more energy? Where's an area that needs more lift? How are we going to solve more problems? That's what we love about Dell, is they're a partner to us in that way, in a really big way.
Thank you for sharing that, and how it all started with pediatric food allergies. And Susan, my question for you is, because I remember, Jennifer, I may have even been on the podcast, we talked about this, that Dell was not a beneficiary in year one, but I think was in year two or year three, correct? It was
Correct.
pretty
Starting
shortly
year
after the
two.
start, starting year two. So talk a little bit about when Jennifer made that phone call, what made you say yes? Because, now if Jennifer Stevens called and said, Mack, Jack, and McConaughey wants to work with you, I'm sure any nonprofit executive in Texas would fall out of their chair. Now, granted, it was just at year one, and I know that, Jennifer, you mentioned this before, year one blew past any expectations that you all had initially. But, it was also innovative. And, I want to talk about that entrepreneurial spirit of Dell and how that compelled you to say yes. And we're going to kind of go in a bold new place that maybe philanthropy hadn't really gone before.
Absolutely. Well, fortunate for me, I knew Jennifer previously from projects that we had done together, from events that she had chaired in the community, the building of Dell Seton at the University of Texas she was involved with, and we'd worked on events there. So the relationship was already cemented. Anything she touches literally turns to gold. And then that personal story of Jack being visionary enough to say, look, I needed food allergy care for my own kiddo, and there wasn't anything. Let's launch it. Let's build it. Dell Children's literally wouldn't have pediatric food allergy or an endowment for pediatric food allergy if not for MJNM, if not for him caring about that, not only for his own family, but for all of Central Texas. So that personal connection to it and what we were going to do with those very first year dollars, I think was very cool and got us, excited about the future. And like Jen said, we've taken it now to way beyond. MJNM has invested over $10.5 million in Dell Children's, and I can tell you all about that. But so it's the impact is just so felt in the halls of this hospital.
That's incredible. And, let's talk a little bit about, because Jennifer made a comment that's gone well beyond food allergies. So let's talk a little bit about how this partnership has evolved from that initial call, from Jack and the concern about pediatric food allergies to kind of what you all are doing collaboratively together today.
Yeah. So the past 7 years, there's been a lot of growth in pediatrics in Central Texas, and everybody's probably felt some of that. But what we've been doing at Dell Children specifically is called the HERE campaign, and that's building complex care to keep children and their families here in Central Texas, not sending them to Dallas, Houston, Philadelphia, and beyond for care. So we've built a heart program. We've built a cancer program. We've built a fetal program. You can now have a baby at Dell Children's. There's a specialized delivery unit. MJNM has been a part of all of that. So heart, fetal, neurosciences has grown. We've recruited a lot of folks. Our academic partners, Dell Medical School at the University of Texas, of course, so we recruit people with that. So that idea of keeping kids in Central Texas and not in healthcare, it's called out migration, not sort of losing them because we can't provide the care, is what we've been centered around. And Jack and the other principals have been right there with us in those areas. Beyond that, Jack's interest in music, of course, um, led us down a path to supporting child life and specifically expressive therapies in child life. So Dell Children's in 2008 had one art therapist, and art therapy is a real thing. I mean, that helps kids get better. There's a lot of research around art and music therapy. And then we added a music therapist. Happy to say, with the support of MJNM, we now have 3 full-time art therapists and 3 full-time music therapists. We have a TV producer to film them and create content for kids. So all that has been the vision of MJNM and really alignment through music and art. And that's been exciting to see. Beyond that, this year's beneficiary dollars helped us support our care team, which is our child abuse team. So I think the magic is that Jennifer, her entire team at JHL, and the principals of MJNM all care about kids like we do. So I think that's why it really works, because we dig in together and we think, okay, what can we do now? Who needs it? Where do we need to lift kids up? And we've just done it in some really big ways.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And that actually segues perfectly kind of into the next, and I'll direct this question to Jennifer and then Susan, definitely chime in. But, strategic long-term planning, and Jennifer is one of the very, very best event producers in the United States. This strategic long-term planning is so important to the overall success of any partnership. So talk a little bit about what it takes to put together for anyone looking to do stuff strategically long term, but also talk a little bit about how MJNM decides which Dell Children's initiatives that they want to support.
Yeah, well, the initiatives and what's going to get support each year, year in and year out, has grown and evolved, as we just discussed. And honestly, I would say the answer to the first part of your question is the same as the answer to the second part of your question, which is we work hand in hand with the beneficiaries in a very collaborative way, all the way from the beginning of planning of each year's event through the execution of seeing the dollars go to work. And Matt, Jack, Matthew, none of us would ever want to presume that we should be dictating to our beneficiaries where and how best to use the dollars. So we work very collaboratively to say, okay, here's how the event went, here's the results, and here's a check. Tell us what you think. How best do you see these dollars helping kids? Where do you see the need? And so we work as a team with each of the beneficiaries, because we would never want to, be presumptuous to think that we know better than the organizations that we partner with. So I think that collaboration, both in terms of planning the event, telling the story, all those pieces leading in that are so important, as well as the follow through, seeing the dollars go to work. I think that has been a very important piece. So the guys are, they're very flexible in how they see the dollars being used, so long as it's meeting the organization where it needs to and serving the kids that are not being reached. And so I can give you an example. This last year, for the first time, we had a conversation with Susan and the Dell team about, okay, what happens when you've got a child that's in long-term, a tough situation, long-term care? What kind of wraparound services do you have available for the family? And what are we doing to help take care of mom and dad so that, mom and dad can take care of the kiddo? And so Susan said, oh, I'm glad you asked. We do have some family support services, and I took that information back, and the guys were like, that's another important place for us to invest, because if the child, needs mom and dad, but mom and dad can't be there because they got to worry about the electric bill or how to pay the parking garage fee, we're not serving the child. And so, that's an expansion of something that the guys were interested in supporting this last year that we hadn't thought about before. But as we were having the conversation with Susan about, is that a need? Does that make sense? How would that work? We discovered that is a need, and it does make good sense. And so, I would say the willingness to listen and collaborate with each other is very important. And so that, I think, really is what makes the partnership so successful. And I don't know always that that's that easy. Like, I think philanthropists want to feel that they're doing that, but I'm not sure that they're always doing it. Sometimes I think people say, here's my dollars, but oh, by the way, I really think they should be used in this way. And of course, you want to be respectful of people's opinions, but at the end of the day, the people that are running an organization, they know the best. They're on the ground, right? They see it every day. So I just think that find a partner you're willing to trust and then trust is a big piece of the puzzle that's made MJ&M so successful for our beneficiaries.
I'll add to
Absolutely.
that that some of the magic is that they show up. They show up here, and not just here, at every other beneficiary. These guys come over here and they see it with their own eyes and they want to be a part of it. So I think that sets them apart as far as feeling the impact, knowing what's going on. A lot of folks might just send someone to send the check. No, these guys get over here and get in the room and meet here at Dell Children's, meet the clinicians that are doing the actual care. And I think that's just really important to having that trust and transparency.
That's incredible. And what I really loved about that answer is that it really shows leadership by MJNM in so many ways. And it really goes to show why it's the top fundraiser in the state is and Mac, Jack, Matthew, and the entire organization trust you all because you all are closer to the ground to do what is best. And they show up. They don't show up to dictate, they show up to see. And that really fostered, seeing by doing. It's amazing what people can learn and see with that. And I think that's just an excellent example of kind of how that works and how you both really tied all that together. And, one way, obviously, if people like Matthew are showing up, that's going to require coordination and communication. So I'd love to hear how important, we've talked a lot about coordination, but communication more specifically, how is that key into maintaining a strong, like Jennifer said, I don't know if it's always this easy, but it is this easy with Dell. Talk about how communication ties into that. And let's start with Susan on this one.
Oh gosh, yeah. I feel like our teams are just in our day, like we're in each other's daily lives, especially at this time of year. But really throughout the year, we're either talking about impact or we're talking about raising dollars or we're talking about the partnership, talking about stories. I think the trust that we've built with Jennifer's team is so important when you're telling some really tough stories. So no one takes it lightly, the things that we get to share with the community and the families that trust us to share them with the community. So I think we're all pretty rooted in getting these kids' stories out there so that people know that the support they need. So yeah, I mean, literally, I don't know there's a day that goes by that our teams are not communicating in some way. And we just want to be the best partner we can be. I don't know if this is the time to say this part, but Rob, I think when you are so fortunate to be a beneficiary of someone else's work and someone else's budget, they're taking their budget, their team, their time to raise money for your organization. That's the highest honor, honestly, that we could achieve. And so we take it very seriously. The kind of partner we want to be is the kind that makes that work easier because we're showing up on time. We've got our assets there on time. We're ready when they need something from us. So I think that is probably what I could share with people, maybe if they're a beneficiary for the first time of someone else's production, that you want to just take it as seriously as you would a meeting with any donor.
That's
Well,
great advice.
I appreciate you saying that. I think that maybe just a finer point on that. Again, I think that sounds easy, but that's actually quite difficult. If you think about it, an organization, hey, you've got your own events, your own things going on, your own team, your own fundraising goals, your own capital campaign, all of these things. But by the way, you also need to send us these things by these days, and we need this number of edits. And can you look at it one more time? And oh, by the way, what about this? You know, we don't ever want to be a burden on the beneficiaries, but we also can't, we're the megaphone, they're the voice. So we really don't have a story if we're not closely telling their story. So we need them. Our success would not be what it is without them. But at the same time, we are coming to them for a lot. And so we try to be on the backside. We try to be as thoughtful as we can. We try not to ask things with a very tight turnaround or a tight deadline. We try to stay as ahead as we can. We try not to switch things up last minute on people or anything like that, which, most of the time we're successful. Sometimes we have to make last minute decisions. But, we try to just be as ahead as we can, because we realize on the other side, we might not have a life outside of MJM, especially right now, but we know they do. And so we really try to be, as collaborative and working together as we can. But I think for an organization, that's not always easy. It's not always easy to say, hey, we need to pause what we're doing for ourselves right here, right now, and go do that for them. So we are very thankful that we have partners that are willing to, think bigger, and work in that way, because it really does take a pretty big visionary organization to be a partner with us. Year one, we hoped to break even, and we net 900,000, and that's great. That was a lot of money, especially however many years, 13 years ago, that kind of money was never raised in Austin, really. But fast forward, and we're raising, 16 million in 2 days. And so you need big visionary people that know how to invest those kind of dollars, wisely as partners. So it's a lot of work on everyone, for sure, but worth it.
So worth
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. Well, and you're both tying on something. I actually kind of want to talk about this a little bit, because you've talked about, Jennifer, you mentioned, asking the organizations, sometimes you feel like you're asking a lot of them. And one of those ways may be that, Dell has their own very substantial fundraising gala that they do. So I'd love to hear from both of you. And I don't think we've ever had this conversation before, but how, kind of the guest procurement process kind of goes, and how you all work together to make sure the right folks are in the room to not only, help MJM, but also help Dell. And then, Susan, I'd love for you to go first. And then Jennifer, maybe talk about some of the other organizations,
Sure.
as well on top of that.
Yeah, I think one of the things being a good partner when you are lucky enough to be a beneficiary is having some skin in the game if you can. If your budget can allow, you sponsor, you make sure you've got a table to fill that where you can take some donors that maybe we have at Dell Children's that care about kids across the community and want to be a part of that, and get them to that table, and just kind of do as much as we can to be lifting it up, knowing, oh my gosh, the worthwhile fundraising that happens in that room. So I think that's a big part of it. And then what else, Jennifer, around just making
Well,
sure we're doing
I
our
think
part?
I think there's two things. And first of all, I very much appreciate your philosophy around that. I think it's very important. To the other organizations, and really as a whole, there's a couple things. One, we're always very clear, if someone's going to either write Dell a check or MJM a check, and they're choosing, we would never want Dell to say, we'll write it to MJM. Never. Like, we don't want to come first, right? But there are, to Susan's point, a lot of philanthropists who care about kids in a really big way, and they're doing what they're going to do, for the organizations they're involved in. But maybe they'd be interested in doing more if they were simply involved here too. So that's what we want MJM to be. We don't want it to take away from our beneficiaries. We want it to amplify our beneficiaries. And I can tell you the impact of that we've seen is when we get people in the room, maybe they come in because they're involved in Cure Duchenne, or they come in because they're involved in, the Rise School. But then as they're sitting there, they learn about a partnership, maybe that Dell Children's is doing with kids for heart transplants. And so now they were interested in Heart Gift. Now they're interested in Heart Gift and Dell because of what they're doing. And so what we've seen over the years is philanthropists involved in one area become involved independently in other areas and other of our beneficiaries. And so that's really rewarding to see too. We see, a philanthropist involved in Rise who learns about the Just Keep Living Foundation. Next thing you know, they're sponsoring a school for Just Keep Living. They didn't cease their engagement with Rise. They didn't cease their engagement with MJM, but they learned yet another thing that they were very excited about investing in. So I think for that amplification of philanthropy, as long as you're, very smart and respectful with each other. Susan and I are, very candid, very honest with each other. Let's be careful here, or let's engage there, whatever. And as long as you're being very thoughtful about that, then I think it's, everybody, what's the right phrase? Everyone rises, right? When we all work together. So I think that we've seen a lot of that. We've seen a lot of philanthropists go from one organization to multiple organizations,
I don't think we have a single
because of
example
MJM.
where the philanthropy hasn't multiplied. I don't think we have a single example where somebody said, "Oh, I can't do that because I'm doing this."
That's
It's
right.
people who want to do things that support kids. So the mission is so centered around supporting kids and empowering kids that that's what those people are there to do that night. And if they do
Yeah.
that in other ways on other nights, that's great too.
Yeah. That's
That
right.
was an amazing answer. And what I appreciate about it is that the humbleness that Mac, Jack, and Matthew have, that they really want to be a bridge to these organizations as opposed to the star of them. And they're all stars in their own right. So I just the humility that the three of them have, and I think that goes a long way as to why that organization is so successful, as they truly make it an ensemble piece, not just MJ&M, but the three of them. So it's like there's 8 stars, on a
Yeah.
single night
I
within a
think that's a
production.
great way to say it. And they are humble in their approach. I think having been so blessed to work with them all these years, I mean, they're very special people. They're very special people for us to get to work with. And, it's a ton of work, but it is so much fun. And it is honestly an honor to get to work with them because they are humble. They care a lot. If you ask any of them about any of our charity beneficiaries, like Susan said, I mean, they are roll up their sleeves. They know the ins and outs. They care about it. Sally and Jack and I were over at Dell one day, and they were looking at the closed circuit television system at Dell. And, 2 months later, I'm talking to Sally, about something else. And she's like, how's the closed circuit thing going? Have the kids been playing bingo? Like they care, they stay in tune, they stay in touch, they ask questions throughout the year. I mean, they're very humble, but also very thirsty to hear, more and learn more about what's happening. So I think that's a huge thing that cannot go,
Sometimes I think the
overstated.
magic is there is star power, but sometimes I think the magic when they're on stage with the kids is that they're up there as they're with their mom and dad hats on and the grandparent hats on. Like it's so organic the way they interact with the kids, and not everybody can do that. That we've seen a lot of things happen on stage with kids and fundraising that aren't so organic. It just feels like they care because they're parents and grandparents.
Yeah. Well, they do care. I mean, behind the scenes already, we're a month plus away from the event, just over. I'm already sending them information. Here's who's going to be on stage. Here's more about their story. Here's what the conversation we've been having. Here, I mean, they start really studying, well in advance. So by the time they get there, they do know the story. They are compelled by not
So
just the
great.
mission, but the individual, and they know what's going on. And so, it is pretty cool to see them spend the kind of time and energy they do. You know, um, it makes my job harder, but it's a good thing.
Good work. It's ne it's never easy, but it's always worth it, especially if you love it.
Totally. Totally.
And that's absolutely the truth in the case. And I want to ask you both a question, because you've both talked quite a bit about many of the things you've done over the years together. And I'd love each of you to answer what's one particular moment in your partnership over the last dozen years or so that each of you is particularly proud of.
Oh gosh, that's a hard question. Can
I
Susan go first?
know.
Um,
I think about there's so many, many things. I think about when Jack Ingram came and did Operation Miracle here at Dell Children's and got to play guitar with a kiddo that he'll never forget, and had a really meaningful, vulnerable time. And if not for him working with Jennifer, that opportunity he wouldn't be here at Dell Children's and doing that. So really proud when we can create that kind of moment. Obviously proud of what well over $10 million has done in impact, built buildings, recruited doctors, recruited clinicians, luminaries. It has launched programs. So the impact of the dollars, but also just the impact of personally impacting somebody who can do so much for kids. Really proud of that. And then just Jennifer and I just have such a high level of trust and transparency, and our teams have that with each other. And I think that's something that's irreplaceable, and you don't find it all the time. If something goes wrong, we just get on the phone, and things are going to go wrong, but how we kind of can communicate through them is amazing. And now we're working, kind of even outside of MJ&M on some
Yeah.
things. And so it's just cool when you care about this community like we do. Anything's possible.
Yeah, that's all true. I think, for me, I think there's several things that, make me very proud, but I think at the very core, what I love is, and it happens, fairly regularly. Someone will say, "Oh, I had a friend. Oh, my daughter's going through X, Y, and Z. She really needs a pediatric allergist." I said, "Oh, you ought to go over to Dell." And I connect them. And then my friend called me later. She's like, "Hey, dummy, you didn't tell me you were like a part of creating all that." And I'm like, "Well, whatever." I mean, it's a fun thing. The impact of what we've done in 13 years is so significant, with all of the organizations, and so feeling that reach, in those little ways, almost little like God wink kind of ways, is really, really special. Myself being a part of, Operation Miracle at the hospital was very special to me and very impactful to me. And then, I would be remiss if I didn't say, I think the impact of what's happened for our family, particularly my children. So, my kids, when this event started, they were babies, they were little, and now they're in college. And, but they talk about learning about the organizations. They talk about tearing apart the wristbands at the kitchen table for mom, or stuffing envelopes, or whatever it was I had them doing. And, they learned, the importance of philanthropy by action and not just by words. And so I think for me personally, the ripple effect of the impact of my own kids has been very special too.
That's amazing. That's all around. It starts at home and in the community. And that's what was great about all of your answers. And just I loved hearing the story about Jack Susan just singing to that child. That's really it's amazing how the little things can really make such a big difference, or it can feel little to one person, but it's the world to somebody else. And I just think that
Yeah.
all
Well, and
those were
Jack,
amazing stories.
later that little boy and his parents, Jack invited, and they were our guests at MJM once he, was out of the hospital and doing better. So we have a lot of full circle moments too, which are very special.
I
And I
love
probably
that.
shouldn't say this out loud because I love Mac and we love Matthew, of course, but we're so happy to have Jack in our corner and have started all this for Dell Children's. And so, and he's pretty fun.
Yeah. It's fun.
They're all
And-
fun.
Well,
They're all
more
fun.
fun and fundraising. Jack is fun. We're gonna have to
Yeah.
Jack
have
is
Jax
fun.
come on and sing some fun songs sometime too. Now, I
Jack is
know I know we're coming up on time here, but I want to end with this question. I think it's a really important one because any successful nonprofit has worked with other nonprofits. Period. They can't do it all on their own. I think there's a misconception with some people who run them out there. So we'll start with Jennifer and then Susan. I'd like you to have the last word, and that is, what advice would you give to an organization entering their first strategic partnership with another nonprofit?
I, I would say a few things. I mean, first, I would say, you're going to have to get out of your own way. You're going to have to think a little differently. You're going to have to be open to the idea of, the definition of success might not fit into that perfect little box that every other definition of success has been able to fit into. And that can be a little scary. So I think getting out of your own way and kind of being willing to be open-minded about a partnership is very important. And then I would say, just, to the point Susan made earlier, which I think is very important, how can you make the relationship reciprocal? How do you amplify that, here comes this entity wanting to help you and tell your story. How can you then amplify what they're trying to do? I think those are kind of two big pieces that are tricky, that an organization has to be prepared to discuss with their leadership, address with their board, not be afraid to advocate. Those would be important.
Those are absolutely critical and great answers. And Susan, what about you? You have the last word.
Just to add to all that, I second all of that. I would say, take the time to build the trust and then the mission alignment. If you have the mission alignment, which here we clearly do, anything's possible. So, and just be a good partner, just all day long. How can I be a great partner to what's going to happen for the good of my organization? And think about that a lot and write it down and list it out and talk about it every year. So I think all those things, and it's just magical.
It is magical. And what you all have built and developed together as a partnership, it's something I've admired for many years. So I'm so grateful, Jennifer, Susan, to both of you for taking the time to chat about this. Such an important topic. And I'm just really grateful for you both. Thank you.
Thank
Well, we're
you.
grateful for you,
Enjoyed
Rob,
it.
and for
That's
all that
right.
you do to help our work in the community. Thank
Oh,
you.
my pleasure to always do so. It's easy when I get to talk with folks like yourself. And before we go, I just want to say for more information about Dell Children's Foundation, visit supportdellchildrens.org. For more information about JHL Company, please visit jahlcompany.com. And for more information about Mack, Jack, and McConaughey, visit mjm2025.com. And that will do it for this episode of Fun and Fundraising. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, reminding you to keep it fun, keep it interesting, and your guests will have a great time. Have a great day, everyone, and take care.